You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, I'm going to put a little curveball on you today. I was on my promotion this morning. I said I was going to talk about Texas redistricting and federal troops in D.C. I'm going to postpone the second one until Monday because I was putting it together, all the materials and whatnot, and I think a lot of information to put in one show. And Josh looks like he has another scheduled appointment. I don't want to keep him here too long. But anyway, we're going to talk about redistricting, gerrymandering, right, wrong, indifferent, whatever, and what's going on down in Texas legislature, of course, with the walkout by the Democrats and things of that nature. This is one of those issues, I think, that that brings out the tremendous wells of hypocrisy in our political system, because it's one of those things that gerrymandering is good in one purpose, but not for the other purpose. But no one seems to have a problem with the concept of it if it benefits them. They hate the idea of gerrymandering, and they're trying to save democracy or whatever when it doesn't benefit them. And it's going to be. I'm going to try to get through the material before I start ranting about their double standards on this issue. Okay, I walked in today. I said, I'm going to do this show on redistricting, and Josh just shook his head. Gerrymandering, I hates it. Sounds like Gollum. Anyway, you like that?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
That was good.
All right. But anyway, it's mighty warm in here, by the way.
Yeah, it's slowly roasting.
Well, what is it, the air conditioning out today? Jonathan, doggone it, son.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, well, are they going to get this thing fixed soon?
Yes.
I hope.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Almost immediately.
I hope so. I mean, you got to stay here. You got another show to go, and
Got a full day.
Yeah, I know, and you can't afford to sweat off any pounds. So
I got to keep what I can get.
Yeah, kid. I understand you have to put rocks in your pocket to keep you on the ground. But anyway, let's go ahead and do the sponsors. I will make the usual proviso. This is my opinion, not particularly theirs. You can ask them what they think about this issue, right, wrong, or indifferent. Who knows? But this is what they're bringing to you. First of all, Auto at Our Place, of course. I was there this morning with the Sunday school men, and I asked them this question about redistricting and, what their opinion is, and it was fairly uniform. I mean, we're all pretty much older, fairly conservative men, but they understood the issue pretty well, and they understand the ins and outs of it. They also understand the hypocrisy of it. So it was interesting, a conversation. But that's the kind of conversations you can have at Our Place, because it's a great place to do business. It's quiet. People don't bug you. The waiting staff, is very, discreet. So we really appreciate the time. Same with Gina's. Great pizza, great conversation. Get yourself a beer, talk over politics. Even talk over with Otto. He'll give you his opinion if you asked him and whatnot. Of course, trying to catch Otto is like trying to catch a hummingbird. He's just flying all over this town. You know what I'm saying? He's got all these enterprises going on, and he's on trips and whatever else. But get yourself a pizza this week. It'll do you some good. Also, our friends over at Old Pro Roofing with John Williams, 817-734-2756. When I was going to Corsicana yesterday, we got absolutely hammered just south of Grandview. And then it led up by the time I got to Hillsboro. And then about as soon as we got east of Hillsboro, heading towards Corsicana, it came down like the wrath of God again for the next 45 minutes of the drive. And I was just thinking, I was hoping we'd get some rain, but I wasn't worried about my roof because John inspected it, and he said it's good to go. I had him inspect it in June, and so it was great to have him there tell me, you're good for another year unless we have hail or whatever. But 817-734-2756, you can also get that assurance. Or if you do need roof repairs, he'll tell you. He's not going to upsell you and give you all this routine. So there you go. I got a lot of dust going on today. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, it's bad out there, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm kind of clogging a bit, and it's just lots of fun. But anyway, let's go on to the next. Joe Kelly over at the Wethington Agency, 817-781-0546. One of the gentlemen I have breakfast with is also in the real estate business, and we were talking about what's going on around here. And there's a lot going on around here, but it's still dependent on certain other factors like interest rates and things of that nature. But that being said, Jeff knows what's going on in real estate in Johnson County. You need to talk to somebody that does it. If people that do these things kind of on their own, that's all great. And if they have the wherewithal and the understanding of how to do it, great. But Jeff does, and he'll give you great information about what's going on in this county in real estate. So again, 817-781-0546. I also our friend Tiffany Jane. I saw her Tuesday night at a Burleson Chamber of Commerce event. If you're not a member of the Chamber of Commerce, here's a free plug. You ought to be a chamber member, because I go to these events, and it's really, really nice, because it was at the National Bank of Texas, and about 3 other banks showed up and showed, solidarity, I guess. I mean, I was talking to one of the bankers, and I was kind of ribbing him about being in a competitor's bank, and they said, well, it's a small town. We still cooperate with each other, and we help each other out and things like that. But Tiffany was there taking pictures. We're going to have a health service. I forgot. Doggone it. I got so distracted this morning I didn't get what she was going to be promoting in the next issue. But it's going to be coming out in about 2 weeks, so I'll know next Monday. But anyway, it's a great magazine. You're going to get 30,000 views or recipients at least, if not more. So there you go. As far as any nonprofit things, there is one on Sunday I'll mention, so don't let me forget. But there's something that'll benefit the Center for ASD. And there you go. Now, where do we start? Well, we know the story more or less what's going on here in Texas. Mr. Trump more or less demanded of the Republicans in the state to redraw the districts. Now, I was asked immediately by a couple of people who still respect my constitutional views or whatever, is this a violation of the Constitution? And the truth is, not really, because in the Constitution it does not say anything really about the federal involvement or restrictions on redistricting, in the sense that they control the drawing of it. And, well, I'm going to reiterate. It's not that the federal government can't get involved in it if they think civil rights issues or voting rights issues are involved, but the drawing of districts has always been left with the states. And it's always been the usual custom by most states to do it every 10 years based on the census. To have a situation where a state draws districts in different time frames is not unconstitutional by the national standards. It may be by the standards of the state, if the state's constitution says that. But the U.S. Constitution does not mandate the redrawing of districts only after a 10-year period. That's the way we've been doing it. The handling of how those districts are drawn, by the way, are left to the states. And out of, I believe, 47 of the 50 states are handled by the state legislatures. In Arizona and in California and in New York, they're drawn by commissions that are created in their own particular ways. But the point I'm making is that the states handle the drawing of the districts. Now, again, because of Supreme Court rulings and voting rights acts, multiple voting rights acts, there are certain parameters the federal government has put on the drawing of districts. Now, I want to get to that towards the end of this discussion, because that is under review. How much authority does the federal government have over state to mandate the drawing of a district that creates a minority district, as they say? But I'll say that for the end. But the point I'm making one more time, I kind of butchered it up at the beginning, is that the states handle this drawing, and the federal government normally stays out. In fact, in 2019, there were so many cases that were being brought to the Supreme Court about unfair districting that the Supreme Court, in a case called Ruco versus Common Cause, in 2019 said this is no longer justiciable is the word, actually, in the federal courts. This is something for the state courts to handle. We're not going to hear any more cases in effect, which they do hear cases, but they're basically saying they're not going to get involved in partisan redrawing of districts and go district by district, state by state, say yes, no, yes, no. So the Supreme Court largely took themselves out of this whole conversation in 2019. Now, they may re-enter that conversation pretty soon based on what we'll be talking about later, but what I'm talking about is that if people are thinking what Texas is doing is illegal or unconstitutional, neither are correct. Now, whether you think it's ethical or right or wrong, we can have that conversation. But what they're doing is not against the law. It's against maybe our accepted customs, but you also need to remember this is not the first time Texas has redrawn districts. in a year not after the census. We did this in 2004 because of court rulings that delayed things and also, again, a walkout by the Democrats. Now, let's look at Texas in particular. This is done at the behest of Donald Trump, which kind of sticks in my craw a little bit. Now, he is making the case that the census was wrong and it unfairly or illegally included non-citizens in the count, and therefore Texas has the right and the obligation even to redraw the districts. And this redrawing would, of course, being a Republican state, would benefit the Republican Party as they say up to 5 seats. And Texas is not the only Republican-led state that's being encouraged greatly, shall we say, by the administration to do this. Florida and Ohio are being discussed as well. Now, in retaliation, California and other blue states are saying, well, we'll do the same thing. It's not that easy. It's not that easy at all, in fact, to just say redraw the districts, rather, in those states. Now, let's look at the Texas situation here in the sense that this is what, right now, if you put up the current map, if you would, Josh, I know you can't see this on the radio, but if you look at the current map right now, the districts that are going to be most affected would be 33, which is very close to us. It's the one that borders us to the north, at least to the northeast. District 12 is the one that's most contiguous, if you will, to our district in 25 here in Burleson. And if you live in the Fort Worth part of, Tarrant County part of Burleson, you're in District 12, and your representative is a guy named Goodwin. But if most of us are represented by Williams, okay. And if you see the map, if you hear this on the radio, you can't see what I'm talking about. But if you see the video or the YouTube, you see that District 25 kind of meanders a little bit to the northwest and goes through into Dallas County and whatever else. But District 33 is one of the most egregiously drawn maps in the entire country. And it was drawn specifically to create a situation where those voters would send a black representative to D.C. That was the purpose of the 1990 Voting Rights Act. Okay? The 1990 Voting Rights Act was not abused by any way. It was specifically designed to create more minority-based districts. What had happened is, in 1986, there was a court case that still is kind of, it's looked at by a lot of scholars as confusing and basically a non-decision. It's called Thornburg versus Gingles, all right? And this is a 1986 case again, where basically you had a group of citizens saying they were being discriminated against because of their race, and these were whites. Okay, the district, they were saying they were right. They were white, and therefore the district was drawn in such a way that would disadvantage them. And the courts basically ruled, well, if it advantages typical minority groups, or another way to say is minority groups that have been typically discriminated against, then it's acceptable. That particular case right now is under review by the Supreme Court, but again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So basically, the current map shows this ridiculous District 33. It goes through East Fort Worth and then through the mid-cities, just very narrowly through the mid-cities, very narrowly through Irving, and then into West Dallas. All right? And then you have this ridiculous District 6 appendage that kind of leaks along the side and takes parts of Irving. And it's very weirdly drawn, and there's no geographical coherence to it, and there really isn't any other coherence to it other than it's designed to create certain districts to create certain outcomes. Okay, District 30 has gotten in the news a lot lately because its current representative is Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett is quickly distinguishing herself as a buffoon and a fool on the national stage. And she's not even that popular within her own district anymore because she doesn't care about them. She's more interested in getting on the View than representing her constituents. And a lot of people are tired of this phony Jasmine from the hood routine when she grew up in an upper middle class St. Louis family, went to private schools and a very private college, and now some of her stories about all the harassment she faced at this private college are kind of being debunked. And so she's trying to show herself as a fighter for the Democratic Party. She's a fighter for herself, all right? What's ironic about Jasmine Crockett is that she was one of the leaders of the walkout of Texas Democrats 4 years ago. This is the second time this decade the Democrats have walked out on the state. So there you go. Okay, go to the proposed one. Again, I know if you're on the radio, you don't hear this, but if you see it, District 33 would be much more geographically contingent, and it would be mostly North Dallas and East Dallas. Now, that being said, is the likelihood of Mark Vesey, the current occupant, going to be part of that district? You don't have to live in the district you represent. Jasmine Crockett, if you see District 30, she doesn't live in this new district. She lives, the eastern part of her district has been shaved off to give to 33. And she didn't have to live in the district. She could live, for one thing, this is not uncommon. It's not something that happens very often, but it's not that big a deal. And so for her to live outside the district is not in any way unconstitutional or illegal. Now, that being said, it could be used against her by an opponent. Hey, she didn't even live in this district. Why she didn't know about you, and that kind of thing. But basically what they've done is they've taken a lot of the factor out of all of this, the racial factor, if you will, and created these districts. And then you have District 25. Well, that appendage of it will be scooted a little more to the left, and we would be part of the same district as East Fort Worth that used to be represented by Mark Vesey. So basically, you'd be adding black votes to District 25. Now, a lot of people are accusing the Texas Republicans of drawing these districts based on race. And the answer is yes, but what race? It's really not the black race, it's the Hispanic race, because we're focused here on Dallas and Fort Worth, but down in South Texas, that's where some of the new districts are going to be drawn around the San Antonio and southwest part of our state. And the reason they're doing that is because the Hispanic vote in Texas has gone redder and redder over the last 3 or 4 elections. And so what the Texas Republicans are doing is not so much they're trying to punish black voters. What they're trying to do is create more Texas districts that are going to be Republican and probably led by Hispanics down in South Texas. We got one right now, okay? And they're trying to create 2 more down there, down on the border, that would be Republican leaning, based on the latest votes. Now, that's what's happening in the state of Texas when it comes to the votes. Now, as we know, since about August 3rd, the Democrats have all left. Not all of them. About 55 of them have left. You have to have 100 members of the House to make a quorum. And there's 95 of them there in the state. And 55 of them took off, and they've been flying around the country based on private jets, based on PAC money, which is a separate issue. Beto O'Rourke is funding a lot of the expenses of these Democrats, and Ken Paxton's trying to take him to court, saying that it's an illegal contribution. That's not going to fly because in Texas, there's hardly anything known as an illegal contribution anyway, so I don't think that's going anywhere. But anyway, they're in Illinois, and they're in California, and they're in D.C., and all this other stuff, making the case that what's going on in Texas is a violation of civil rights and a threat to the democracy. A kind of a go-to every time the minority party, where the Republican and Democrats say, they don't like what's going on. So they've been out of the state this whole time. This is, again, the 3rd time this century that's happened. It happened in 2003, then it happened 21, and it's happening now, obviously. Why did they leave the state? Why didn't they just stay home? Because the Constitution and the law in the state does allow the Speaker of the House to issue arrest warrants to force their attendance in the House. So literally, if they go home, they could be drugged back to Austin by force and handcuffed to the desk. And that's happened in our past before, but not very often. It's not a common story, but it has happened in our past. Because this is really this idea, well, if we can't win the fight, we're just going to deny you a quorum kind of thing, is a relatively new thing, at least for Texas. Also, Abbott says we're going to try to vacate those seats of the Democrats who are not there. I doubt this will pass the Supreme Court or Texas Supreme Court or U.S. Supreme Court ruling. They could say, well, they're derelict in their jobs, and therefore they have vacated their seats, and therefore they can be up for re-election or whatever else. I don't know if the governor could do that arbitrarily. And, of course, the inevitable court cases will delay it, and probably to the point where it's no longer even an issue. But you're going to have a situation where that's the threats being, and also the fines that are being levied against them. Those fines right now are being paid by O'Rourke and by groups associated with George Soros. And that's where some of the legal actions are coming in. All right. So there's the background for Texas. Will this walkout work? The answer is no. Okay? It'll temporarily stall it. And Tuesday, the 19th, is that right? Yeah, the 19th, the special session will end. What's going to happen on the 20th? Well, we'll call another special session. And if they continue to boycott that, they'll call another special session. The governor has the unlimited authority to call special sessions up until really the next election. And so he can outweigh them. And the thing about this walkout, if you will, the denial of quorum, is not the financial cost, like I said, is being borne by support groups and PACs and George Soros and O'Rourke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I doubt they're going to be able to find any legal standing to make a case out of that. But there's a personal price that's being paid by these members. They're missing birthdays, funerals, graduations, family reunions, whatever else. This is what happened the last time they walked out, is that after about 4 weeks, they started trickling back in, and therefore the quorum was finally met, and the bill that they were opposing 4 years ago was about a voting rights change, as they saw it. Basically would eliminate certain voting practices that were instituted during COVID. And so, will this work? I bet by after Labor Day they'll have enough for a quorum and they'll pass it. And really, some of the smart guys in the Democrat Party in the state have said, "Come home, this will pass. Let's take it to court." And because the longer they wait out the governor, which they can't wait out, the longer it'll be before this works through the process. And you may have a situation where any legal action, if there is any to be had, and if courts actually do support the Democrat position on this, they're just delaying that process from getting started. Plus the fact, as cynical as you want to say it is, there's other things that the Republicans want to do this session that they knew that if they did them first, they'd pass, like flood relief primarily for our friends in the Hill Country. If they put that first, it'll be passed, everybody will be hugging and shaking hands, and then get to this contentious issue, and then it'd split. Well, they put this gerrymandering thing at the beginning so they could say to the constituents, hey, they held up your relief efforts and money because they were too busy taking off to Illinois or California or wherever there are today. So there's certain things that are being upheld or withheld by this process that really are important, to a lot of people in the state. And the ads write themselves. They're going to be able to say to in these Democrat constituencies, hey, these guys bailed on you when you needed them. They were too busy getting on MSNBC and giving interviews to Washington Post and, getting pictures made with Governor Pritzker of Illinois. And while you were waiting for your relief help, they were withholding it. So that's going to be the angle you'll see in the next election. Now, what about the national response? Well, here's the thing about the national response is that this is where the hypocrisy comes in. I can't think of a worse state to go and make your case about the evils of gerrymandering than Illinois. All right, Illinois is seen as the worst gerrymandered state. And the fact is that they have 17 members of the House, 14 are Democrats, yet 43 or 4% of the voters vote Republican. Okay? Now, if you want to do that proportional thing, and there's no law saying it has to be, by the way, unless the state wants to do it that way. No state does that, nor will any state anytime soon. I'm going to have to wash the dust out of my mouth a little bit. There you go. Anyway, there's no state that does that. Where they say, okay, if you win 45% of the vote, you get 45% of the seats. That's how they do it in Great Britain. The parliamentary system. No state does that. They all draw districts to their advantage. And Illinois is one of the worst. And the thing is, the Democrat response is, well, we'll just redraw our districts. Well, it's very, very limited. Why? Because they've already done it. That's the big problem. That's one of the arguments of the Republicans in the state is, you got nothing to say to us about this issue, Illinois, Oregon, Maryland, Massachusetts, because your Republicans are basically, gerrymandered into one district at most, and even though if 45% vote Republican, you're going to get one seat in Maryland. They have one seat in Oregon, even though that state is pretty much half Republican, half Democrat. But the Democrats run the state, therefore they do the districts accordingly. Massachusetts, their governor gets up there and raises Cain. Her name's Maura Tierney, and she gets up there and she goes nuts and blah, blah, blah about how unfair this is. But there's not a single Republican representative from Massachusetts, even though 36% of their state is Republican. They're just so spread out, they can't, even if they wanted to, they couldn't draw them a district. California, same thing. My point is that when you hear people like Nancy Pelosi saying, we're here to save democracy, I just want to retch, because she represents a state that's one of the most gerrymandered in the country. Even the Republicans in California, they're more numerous than we think, but they're so gerrymandered out of any representation that you wouldn't know it. And so she has nothing to say about this, but every time they talk about we're saving democracy, I want to just throw up. When that Pritzker, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, was talking about the evils of gerrymandering, even Stephen Colbert called him out on it, and for Colbert to bring it up. I wish I'd had that clip, but it made me, I didn't think of it until this morning, and I was kind of busy. But Pritzker last week was on the Colbert Late Show, and Colbert shows how ridiculous some of these districts in Illinois are, and he, what's the story here? And Pritzker didn't answer the question. He starts to talk, blah, 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 and the evil Republicans, and then so, Pritzker wants to be president in 28. Not a chance in the world. Governor Governor Newsom wants to be the next president. And I don't think that's going to work either for various reasons. But that's not who's going to run in 28, because that's way off, thankfully. But the point is that why don't the Democrats respond accordingly is that they don't have enough juice to squeeze out of their states, because they've already done this. Minnesota has done this. Okay? Every state that can be gerrymandered by Democrats already is, to a point where there just is not going to be any more juice left to squeeze, is the current phrase I'm hearing a lot. So that's why the Texas Republicans feel totally justified in what they're doing. Okay? Again, I'm going to look at some of the data, so to speak. For example, right now, Illinois, in the last election, it went 53-47, Democrat-Republican, yet 82% of the seats are Democrat. This happens on the Republican side, too, by the way. North Carolina is about 50-50, yet 10 of the 13 are Republican. Now, let me divert here for a minute. If you want to argue the fact that gerrymandering in and of itself is a bad thing, regardless of party, hey, we can have that conversation. If you're going to argue the point of view that what the Republicans are doing is wrong, but the Democrats get a free pass, then you can miss me on that conversation entirely. Because if one party is not going to do, I don't care what the nobility the Democrats are putting on themselves now about how when they go low, we go high, and this other rubbish. If you want to say gerrymandering is a bad thing, it's bad for democracy, that was kind of the common opinion of my breakfast crew this morning. They think gerrymandering is a bad thing in and of itself. They don't understand why it can't be more geographically coherent. And that makes a good case. However, they're going against over 200 plus years of political practice. Where did gerrymandering come from? It didn't come from Newt Gingrich and the Republicans or anybody else. It came from Elbridge Gerry, which is, that's how I pronounce his name. He was the governor of Massachusetts at the beginning of the 19th century. And they drew districts for the state house for Massachusetts in such a way, in such bizarre shapes, that they said it looks like a salamander, and therefore they kind of created this amalgamation word gerrymandering. And gerrymandering has been with us ever since. And what's ironic is that the author of the Federalist paper number 10, which I read in class, James Madison, who warned of the dangers of faction, warned of the dangers of political parties and the things they're capable of, made this man his vice president in 1812. So I guess Mr. Madison changed his mind a little bit. And so this has been going on for over two centuries. And it's not going to change, because neither party's going to, disarm. And there's no way, unless they, I don't know how it would ever happen, but unless the states all concurrently come to the same conclusion and change the way they draw maps, then okay, but it's not going to happen. And it's the nature of politics. And Madison in the Federalist Papers warned about this, that the nature of politics is going to create these kind of positions in people and create these kind of incentives in people to do what's best for themselves or their party, even while declaring it's for the people or democracy or whatever else. That's why I get so tired of people in this particular issue said this is a threat to democracy. I was not hearing these voices when Illinois drew their districts, or when Massachusetts drew theirs, or when Oregon drew theirs, or Maryland. That's one of the worst states in the union. If you've ever seen the map of Maryland, it's egregious. And so I didn't hear any of this saving democracy routine then, and now we got people puffing themselves up, and not just Pelosi, but others talking about how they're there to save democracy. Well, they were conspicuously silent when their side was doing it. And to be fair, when the Republicans were the ones in this position, they were saying we're getting hosed here. This is not democratic. This is not part of the spirit of democracy. And now the Republicans in charge in certain states are saying, hey, we're just doing what you did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Tit for tat, tit for tat. And it's going to be this way. So we can have a philosophical debate about the evils of gerrymandering, but we're not going to have a practical resolution to it. It's going to happen as long as we keep electing the kind of people we do. And it's not just 2025. I could have said that in 1925. I mean, the idea of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I hate that movie for so many reasons. And why I hate it is the idea that we send people to Washington with ideas and nobility, and then they're going to fight for their districts. That's so much of this, so much rubbish, because it's they are politically motivated. I'll bring back Jasmine Crockett. She didn't get two wits about the people in District 30, but she does care about getting on MSNBC and ranting and dropping the F-bomb, because apparently that's the new Democratic way of showing that they got it. They're keeping it real, bro. Even Chuck Schumer, who has got to be one of the biggest dorks you ever met in your life, is dropping F-bombs in public. Thank you, Mr. Senate Minority Leader, for demonstrating some class. But I know cussing in politics, who would ever thought that would happen? But just keep it off the record, if you would. Now, let's talk about the court situation. In 2024, no, 25. No, it was this year, that's right. This past May, a group of white citizens in Louisiana sued Louisiana, saying that they were being discriminated against because they were drawn in a district which they were now becoming the minority in that district, and that their votes were being basically negated. Now, under the again, that act I mentioned earlier in 1990, that was the intention of the law. That wasn't just an unfortunate byproduct. It was intended to create districts in which non-whites would be the majority in that district, so that it send non-whites to Washington. Well, this time, what you have is the group within that's being drawn against is suing, even though they're not non-white. They are white people. And so it went to the Supreme Court in May, and the court basically said, we'll decide this next fall, which a lot of people, Clarence Thomas in particular, was pointed with his criticism of that decision. But they said, we'll decide this in the fall. People were expecting this decision into June, and they come out kind of in the last couple of days of the session and said, no, we'll wait. Okay, I'll have a little coffee here. It takes a lot of caffeine to keep this brain percolating. How about you, bud?
Oh, you're talking to an ex-barista now. This
Oh, yeah, that's right.
this caffeine addiction isn't going away.
Yeah, ex-barista. It sounds like some sort of, you left the church kind of thing, I'm an ex-barista.
It feels like it.
Yeah.
Retired. Let's say retired.
Yeah, okay, retired barista.
That sounds a little better.
Well, anyway, in the last month, the court asked both sides, the plaintiffs and the defendants in this Louisiana case, to answer this question. Is it a violation of the 14th Amendment to draw districts by race? That's in effect what it said. The 14th Amendment, as we well know, is supposed to give due process equally to all citizens. Is the intentional drawing of districts by race a violation of due process? And the people that watch the court really closely say, oh my goodness, they are setting up a decision that would say the intentional drawing of districts by race may be unconstitutional. And if you thought people were upset about that Dobbs decision 3 years ago, Katie barred the door on this one. You'll see riots in the street. And you'll have accusations of racism and, back to Jim Crow and all this other stuff. I don't know how they'll rule because basically they didn't give any indication with this postponement. As far as, a lot of people will, try to analyze through the responses of the justices of the case itself and see what they were thinking. And they really didn't come with a consensus. So there isn't anything to really hold on to if you think that they're going to decide one way or the other. What they're concerned about is by asking this question, they're putting it out there. Is it unconstitutional to draw to districts by race? Is the question. And this court already has said, Kavanaugh has said, there will be a day when race will no longer be considered in these decisions. Roberts has said the way to end discrimination by race is to end discrimination by race. He said that in a case about 12 years ago, not dealing with voting rights. You've also had cases like the one against Harvard a couple of years ago that said that they were discriminating against Asian students because of their race, because they were doing too well and they were taking up too many seats in the freshman class. This court has been moving slowly towards the position that race is no longer necessary in every decision that's being made about not just representation, but anything else. Also, you have in 2013 a case called Shelby County versus Holder. Shelby County's in Alabama that basically said that the states no longer had to send certain states in question, not all 50 states, but certain states in question that had a history of Jim Crow and discrimination in voting. They used to have to send their districts in for approval from the Justice Department, and the court said that's no longer necessary. And Holder is Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder, and he was apoplectic, as they say. But the point is also that the court is seen as moving to a position where they're going to say you're going to have to draw these districts without a racial component. Now, is that a bad thing? Who can predict the outcomes? But I'll put it this way. The Democrats in 1990, when they voted for that Voting Rights Act to create more minority-based districts, they did so because they thought that they looked around at the 435 seats and they were mostly white, and a number of representatives of minority representatives, that's a better way to put it, that were well underrepresented by the proportions that are present in our demographics. And so did it work? You bet. How did it work? Well, they drew districts, some of them that got thrown out by courts anyway, but a lot of them didn't. They drew districts in such a way that would create these districts. And what they did was they put all the black voters, so to speak, or the Hispanic voters, so to speak, in one district, and then they took those votes out of the neighboring districts. And what it created was a tremendous opportunity for the Republicans to take those seats. And if you live in Texas long enough, you know this story. In 2003, they drew those districts. They put in these special, minority-based districts, and they put 6 white Texas Democrats in the crosshairs, including Chet Edwards, who represented us at that time. And he was the only one that survived the 2004 election. Martin Frost went down. Charlie Stenholm out west went down. Across the state, the new number of white Democrats, office holders, went down. Across the South, it went down because they took the black vote, which is really heavily Democrat, and concentrated them in their own districts, so to speak. And yes, they got a black representative, but at the cost of 2 white representatives now. And that's why you look out throughout the entire South, the only white Democrats usually are urban, like Lloyd Doggett in Austin. They're trying to draw him out for years, but he keeps hanging in there. But most of I can't think of hardly any other white Democrats across this state or the South. And so the Democrat Party paid a real big price for this by emphasizing race, by the removal of black and Hispanic voters from areas that were fairly moderate and were fairly competitive. And what this did, this Voting Rights Act of 1990, I think it's one of the worst acts ever passed, because what it did, it's led to the polarization we have now. We have 435 seats. Only about 23 to 24 of them are going to be competitive. And if this goes through like they think it is, even less that, we may have a situation where only about a dozen to 18 seats are truly and genuinely competitive, and you're going to have a situation where we have these narrow majorities from either party, and they're going to be very bitter, and they're going to be very, this is going to continue. And one thing I don't like about the minority districts, is that, and you can't argue these are things without being labeled racist, so I'll just take my chances. But I don't like 2 things about it. One is, if I'm in a district where I have very few minorities, I don't have to care about what their problem is, because they're not going to cost me my seat. If I'm representing a district that has been drawn in such a way that I have maybe 15% at most non-whites in it, if I'm of that mindset, I don't have to do anything to try to win that vote, because I'm going to win very easily otherwise. And the same thing happens in reverse in these minority districts. I don't care about the white people in this district, because that's not what put me in the seat. And so what you're having a situation is that people are not getting any decent representation, because the representative has no incentive to represent them. I'm not going to make any claims about Roger Williams or anybody else around this area, because I don't know them personally, and I've been told that they're decent people and have their right hearts, and I'll go with that, okay? I'm not here to throw mud on these guys that I don't know. But the point is that if I'm running in District 25, I know where the votes are, and I know where they're not, and I know who I'm going to pay attention to, and I know who I'm going to pat on the head and say, yeah, I'm really concerned about it. I'll pray about it and I'll beat it. You think Jessamine Crockett gives 2 wits about the white voters in her district? They're all in other districts. And the ones that are stranded there, they're not going to put her in office, and she knows it. So one thing I'd like to see at the end of the racial gerrymandering is the return of competitive moderate districts, because I want a situation where, now that we've redrawn these districts, and taking the racial factor out of it, now I'm going to have more non-white voters in my district, and I better start paying attention. All right? And would that happen? Well, we can hope. But that hope doesn't exist under the current situation. There's no hope at all of having a more workable House of Representatives, as long as it's so heavily gerrymandered, and as long as neither Democrat nor Republican in almost all these districts have any incentive to reach out to the other side. I'm a Texas Republican. I have no incentive of working with the Democrats, and vice versa. And a lot of it's because of this stinking gerrymander. There's another point, and this is that it takes away. Let me put it this way. I don't like the fact that we treat people as, you are a member of this group, therefore. All right? The idea that because you're black, you're going to only vote for a black person is, in my mind, belittling and racist of that person saying it to that voter. The black voter is fully capable of making up his or her own mind, and the idea that you will only vote for a black person, I think, is racist. All right? That's about as subtle as I could put it. The idea that you're Hispanic and you will only vote for a Hispanic is racist. If I said, if you're white and you'll only vote for a white person, they'd throw stuff at me and they call me a Klansman and all this other stuff. For the record, I have voted for non-white candidates, so save the mail. But I'm just saying, the idea that because I'm white male, I'll only vote for a white male, I think is ludicrous. And why should I expect my black neighbor to only vote for a black person because they're black? That's racist. That is condescending, and that's exploitive. And that's why I hate these racial gerrymanders so much, because it just treats people as dots on the page or whatever, or spots on the map, and it don't treat them as living, thinking people that are fully capable of voting for anybody they want. And if I'm a black person and I vote for a black person because of that, that's my vote. But it doesn't mean that's my vote. It doesn't mean you should expect it to be my vote. I don't want people to assume that I'll vote a certain way just because of my skin color. Now, if that is a motivating factor for me, fine. I'm a free citizen. I can vote for whatever person I want, whatever reason I want. But the idea that we're going to assume because you're Hispanic, male, that's the only person you'll vote for, that's racist, condescending, and this whole idea of treating people equally and treat them as individual human beings goes out the window when we start collecting by race. And that's my rant for that. You like that one, huh?
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Mic drop. Yeah. Well, I don't have a mic here, but no, I want the black and Hispanic voters or Asian voters, you fill in the blank voters, to be equally represented. And right now they're not. They're not. And until they put pressure on representatives in Republican districts, they're not going to get anywhere near what they want. And you're going to have these idiots like Crockett running around, or like Matt Gaetz was in Florida, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Lauren Bobbitt. I don't care for them at all, or AOC, whatever. Fill in the blank. You'll have fewer of these cretins running around in Congress, because they're going to actually be accountable to voters, white, black, Hispanic, all in between. I can't afford to be some flag-waving Klansman because I only have 10% minorities in my district. I can't afford to be Jasmine Crockett throwing down the F-bombs when I have a sizable contingent of non-black voters in my district. All right. And there you are. Well, I feel better now. I hope you understand the spirit in which this was given. One of my great grievances and griefs of what we're going through now is this intense polarization of Congress and the wave after wave of trash we have to deal with as the American people. And I think the way that we draw districts and the way we categorize people has led to what we have now. And there you go. A program and note. Next week, on Monday, I'm going to talk about the D.C.'s situation with the federal troops. It's not quite as, like everything else, you just got to take it with a grain of salt, because you've got one side yelling military dictatorship and the other side yelling we're here for the rescue. Anyway, and then on the 19th, Tuesday, I have Victoria on. We're going to talk about what's going on in the city. It's budget time right now, and that kind of is a side note. Mr. Fletcher did have me ask you to, hey, they're putting the budget together right now, and the time to make your point known is not the day they vote for it. They're going through workshops. They're wanting to hear from the citizens. They desperately want to hear from the citizens, because the last thing they want to get is early October, all these emails say, why did you put that in the budget, when they had ample opportunity to make your 2 cents known. All right, and so thank you, Josh.
Anytime.
And we will see y'all next week. My ears are sweating.